I suspect this is not where it ends, and people that are running and managing engineering teams are gonna have to continue to stay on top of it. So like, what is your advice to them on how to do so?
There's always maybe it's a head of engineering, maybe it is the VP, maybe it's like a staff engineer who's like the most AI crazed person and has decided that the highest leverage thing they could be doing is radicalizing their company around AI. I think the companies that are the most on the frontier have a powerful, influential person who just can do whatever they want and evangelize whatever tool stack they think is currently the best possible thing to do and try all kinds of things.
What I would say is like it's important to stay involved in the details, understanding what the day-to-day is like for developing software. And I think the reason that I would say that is that some of these small inefficiencies, these little paper cuts really build up and really waste engineers' time, and you end up with a very inefficient software engineering organization, not able to ship code. With AI, that just multiplies because instead of one engineer not getting things done, it's a 10x engineer not getting things done. And so developer experience is not the sexy thing when you're shipping, Greptile, but like making sure that you know that your engineers are efficient and knowing day to day like what's slowing them down and getting that unblocked is really important.
I'm right here. Okay. Actually, just coming up, you guys can introduce yourself primarily. Cool. Thanks to everybody for being here. My name's Brett. I work at a venture capital firm called Initialized Capital, primarily a generalist fund based here in SF. It's seed stage and pre-seed focused. More of a stage focused in sector, invest in a wide variety of things, and a couple founders for a portfolio. So I will let them introduce themselves. I guess maybe start off just like who are you, and what are you working on? I guess we'll start with Daksh.
Sure. My name is Daksh. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Greptile. We build agents that review and test AI-generated code. At companies like NVIDIA and Coinbase, we review about 1 billion lines of code a week. We catch about 2 million bugs a week. And started working with Brett 2 years ago now.
Matt?
I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Trunk. We do all things CI and testing. So we have a merge queue, flaky test detection, CI flaky detection, dynamic CI, all that kind of stuff.
And actually, I'm kind of curious, as we're going to be talking about how to organize engineering teams and what that looks like these days, your backgrounds and like what you've experienced in the past, because I think there's a little bit of contrast. Maybe Matt, you can tell us about how you ended up founding Trunk.
So my background, I've been a software engineer for about 15 years before founding Trunk. I started my career at Microsoft and then spent some time at Uber, and then at Uber in the self-driving car program. And so that's at Uber is where a lot of the ideas for Trunk started. A lot of thinking about how do you start a repository with 10 people that's going to scale to hundreds. What sort of automation do you put in place to make sure that those contributions stay on the rails, things don't break, your main branch is still shippable every commit every day, that kind of thing.
This is my first job, and
So zero previous engineering teams.
Zero, and wrote a pull request when we were starting the company, and I said, "Can someone review this?" And everyone said no, and so we were like, "Okay, I guess I have to write AI to do this now." And now we give it to other people that don't want to review code.
Okay, and so I guess what's interesting about that to me is you're kind of making up engineering orgs from scratch, and you have lots of priors here. So. I guess let's maybe just start with like how are your teams structured? How do you have engineers working in teams? Like how many of them per task? Like a little bit of the like framing on the day-to-day of what engineering looks like internally.
Sure. Yeah, I can start. So we typically operate in teams of about 3. So we have like one tech lead manager person who leads the team. Teams are organized around products, and then we have one platform team that sort of manages the infrastructure and cross-cutting platform aspects. So we have one team for merge queue, one team for flaky tests, a platform team. That's pretty much how it's organized.
And it's just engineers?
In the engineering side,
that's. Do they each have like are there PMs? Or are they assigned to teams?
There's no PMs. It's all engineering led. I mean, because we're building for engineers, there's like a high level of empathy by the engineers to make good product decisions most of the time. And then we learn from customers when we're wrong.
Yeah, and then how does that compare to Uber in terms of team?
So yeah, I think when we first started, there was a lot of like cargo culting structure from Uber, for better or worse. And honestly, a lot of that stuff doesn't fit at a startup, and even less so at a startup in the AI age. So I think we were like pretty process heavy, pretty like structure heavy, and a lot of that stuff just sort of dissolved over time as we looked at it and said, hey, does this serve us? Like, is this useful? And the answer a lot of the time was no. And so we went from a lot of like very high process, process heavy stuff to like just more autonomy for each engineer.
Okay.
How many engineers do you have total?
Right now we're at 14.
Okay. We're similarly sized, similarly structured, where we have 1 or 2 engineers per problem, and some of those problems are platform problems, some of those are product problems. We have 2 people that work on memory, 2 people that work on sandboxes for code execution, 2 people that work on the interface for everything, and so I think very similar structure.
Did you, and since you didn't come from a previous culture, did you iterate to those team sizes, or is that kind of like what you guessed was going to be?
I think a lot of everything we do is like organic and pragmatic, and so I think even this was just, it seems like when there was 1 person working on each problem, that was not enough, and 2 seemed like enough. Maybe 3 is better. We'd never know because we have other problems. Yeah.
You saturated it and stopped. I guess in that vein, are you both growing your team? Do you think is there an obvious relationship between the amount you do and the number of engineers you add, or like are there bottlenecks now that you have like so many functional problems and enough engineers per problem?
We are hiring, but we're not trying to grow team sizes. I actually really like this team size of 3. I think even from Uber time, I've always felt like my managers should be, like the tech leads should be coding every day, at least half of their time, right? And I think as soon as your like frontline managers or tech leads aren't doing that, you're a little bit too distance from what's actually happening on the team. And I think that these team sizes of 3 are great. I think like if somebody goes on vacation, then that leaves you a little thin in terms of like responding to issues. I like those team sizes. I think 3 to 4 is like perfect.
Yeah, very similar. I think I guess we'll have to try 3, so that might change things.
You're convinced.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. 3's starting real good. I don't know. If somebody goes on vacation and suddenly it's like 1 person just alone at work. And sometimes they both go on vacation because they're friends from all the time they spend working together. But I think the surface area problems has grown a lot, because I think there's some interesting quadratic thing where you work on 10 problems and you can probably then think of 20 other problems. When you work on 2 problems, you can probably only think of like 2 other problems that you could work on. And so as we've gotten more ambitious, we've started to recruit. I mean, as you've probably experienced, recruiting is very competitive, and especially in person in San Francisco, there's a lot of really great startups. Capitalization for startups auto scales a lot faster than the supply of talent does, and so I think we're hiring as fast as we can, which is not very fast.
And then I guess across engineers, how do you think about senior, junior? Does it matter? Is that the old thing? Are you pairing people based on seniority or in triads?
So I think 2 or 3 years ago we just stopped hiring junior engineers, not because I don't think that they contribute, but because we just weren't structured to coach them up well. We didn't invest in that, and that wasn't like a priority for the company. And so rather than doing a disservice and continue to hire junior engineers, we just stopped. So a lot of our engineers are senior or higher.
So we started out with this approach because my co-founders and I were fresh out of college, and we were like, okay, maybe someone who's been doing this for a little bit could help, because most of our users would be people that have been engineering for a long time. And so we do have a number of engineers that are of that shape. And recently we started to interview, reluctantly at first, new grads from some good schools. And there's a new class of new grads now that got really good at using AI in college. But they aren't effective for the reasons you would assume, that they're very good at using AI, but more that because they were learning coding with AI, they are very good at it from 4 years of using AI to learn things a lot faster than they would have otherwise learned them. And we had a few of these guys, and what's interesting is they kind of know the jagged frontier of their own skills. So they'll know that they aren't capable of architecting this very complex system, and they'll be inclined to ask AI on how to do it better. It's almost like AI is their senior engineer in some ways, and they're the high variance idea producers, and the AI serves as guardrails for them to not do anything that's understandably and obviously bad.
Huh, that's really interesting, because I've definitely thought before about like AI nativity in terms of like tool chain familiarity and leaning into the tools. But on at another level of like having grown up being taught by AI means you're ready to be taught by AI. And so I guess I'm curious in my next question, like, are you selecting, how aggressively are you selecting for people that are like, for lack of a better term, like native to AI systems and AI learning and using these things, and or we're already on the team and aggressively adopting it?
Yeah, I think a year ago we were pretty aggressive at asking those types of questions in the interview process, like how eagerly were people adopting AI, how are they using it day to day, and we were finding a lot of candidates sort of weeding themselves out. There was sort of like a lack of adoption. More recently, that hasn't been an issue, and I think everyone who's coming in is like very AI, like day to day. I think on the topic of junior engineers and learning being AI native, though, I think that the personality trait of the successful engineers who are maybe like new grads now are personality traits that were required to be successful in engineering even a decade ago. And it's the thing where you like scratch at the level below you and next to you and whatever. You're curious about what's around you. And I think AI accelerates your ability to learn those things. And so I think like the people who think that way, like that's a personality trait that makes you successful then and even now.
Yeah, that makes, I totally, like, it's like a lever for agency. Because I remember when I was coding, it was kind of people like, do you do front or back end? And I'm like, I don't know, what do you need? Like,
yeah, exactly. It's like a decade ago, it was like, do you understand the open source project that you're built on?
Yeah.
Like, have you opened that box and looked and seen where the wires
as a Rubyist,
are?
you had to read the source of every single gem if you wanted to be able to do anything. But anyway,
I
no longer a problem.
like YouTube was similar, where you could get way better programming faster because of the internet. And so people that wanted to get really good at programming, the variation between them and the people that just did university grew a lot. Just, the internet just made it easier to learn.
Yeah.
Difficult programming things.
And then project management, are you using tools? How does it, like, what do you just...
Yeah, that's
does the AI task everybody? Like, how do you herd the cat?
Yeah, so we have always used Linear for project management, and 2 years ago when everything was pre-AI, that was like pretty regimented, very process-driven, very process-centric. But the more we've adopted AI and the faster we've been able to ship things, the more it feels like using a project management thing is just slower, right? Like, why am I writing the ticket? It takes as long to write the ticket as it does to ship the feature, so like, why do I need
It's
that?
almost like the same motion. In some
Yeah,
cases,
exactly.
right?
Like I spent as long typing the ticket in as I could have spent prompting Claude, and then it would have just been done. And so I think over the past couple of years, all of our planning has just kind of dissolved a bit. So going from like, okay, we have a quarter plan, now we kind of have like a one-page document of like what I think the priorities are, and teams just review that regularly. And when we get through them, like so much has changed about either the landscape of how people develop software or the features that we've shipped, that if we'd planned for 3 months, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. And I think that's part of like, we ship faster, but also the landscape is changing so fast all the time for like how our customers work.
I do sprints.
What's that?
Do you have sprints?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long are they?
2 weeks.
And then do you get more done per sprint than you did like a couple
far
years
and
ago?
away. Absolutely. Yeah.
Are you? How are you organized?
So we have a very large whiteboard in the office. We're a very in-person company, and then we just write down every week what everyone's falsifiable specific goal is for the week. And I guess we write them down first, and then we review them together to make sure they make sense. And then once a month, we do a more deeply thought out draft of here's what I think we want to do. Anything that's non-obvious, like it isn't a fix or an improvement, we've kind of tried to foster a deep writing culture where we just write these one-page documents. And they have to answer this 7 questions that I think all product things to answer. Like, why are we building this? Who is it for? How do we know we need it? How will we know it worked after we're done? And so on and so forth. And because we write all these things down up front, the actual programming is very interesting. I think there's a senior engineer on the team who articulated this in a very interesting way, where he said that if he has 5 days to work on something, he spends 3 days writing a design doc. On Thursday, gives the design doc to an agent. Friday is testing. And it's a very interesting thing of like, if you give me 5 days to build something, I'll spend 3 days writing the prompt. And once articulated very clearly what he wants, turns out that works better than doing this iterative thing, to be very clear and upfront about what you want at the beginning.
Do you either both of you feel like you have to give engineers more trust, and even on like the product management side, because they're getting more done before you have a chance to see what's happening?
Yeah, I think for two reasons. That's one, definitely. The other part is that the cost of features has gone way down, right? Like if you can ship something in a week that used to take 6 weeks, it doesn't matter as much to be so deliberate up front, because we could build it 6 times in 6 weeks. We'll get one of them right. Whereas if we only had 6 weeks to build it once, we needed to plan a lot to get it right up front. And so that's been a shift for me personally, is like letting engineers have more autonomy and just trusting, okay, you have a way you want to build this, like go for it. We'll see the outcome in 2 days, and then we can decide, do we iterate on it or do we should just ship that version?
Do you have to be more willing than before to rip things out? Because I feel like that's a common product management failing of like just getting stuck with the things that you build. Yeah,
but the code used to be like so hard fought, like every function, every component, there's like an emotional investment in it. And I think that made it hard to like want to pull it back, because you know how hard you fought to get there, and you might have to do it again if you pull it back. Yeah. And now it was so easy to get there that like I could do it again and I could do it better. And so rewrites are easier, and like there's just less emotional attachment to, okay, we got to pull this back and ship it again next week.
I guess I imagine you've Daksh watched it more in real time change. Have you noticed any difference in organization as a reaction to people shipping more things faster?
Yeah, I mean, to a great degree, the premise of our company was that when coding got really, really fast, that review and testing would become the new bottleneck. And we bet that would happen. And it turned out to be generally true, as it seems so far. And I think there's a lot of second order effects to things going out really fast. I think part of it is part of the bottleneck is actually just the human ability to come up with interesting ideas that are worth building all the time. And I think that the quality bar for an idea goes down when producing it is very easy. And so products get sloppier. Because when you have to be able to tell an engineer, say, hey, you should spend 3 weeks building this thing. Or an engineer has to be like, I'm going to spend, me and my friend here is going to spend 3 weeks building this thing. You scrutinize that idea a lot more deeply. And so you end up with a product that's more deliberate. And I think the human ability to come up with very good ideas and then the user's ability to absorb changes in the product are actually, I think, the final bottlenecks of coding once everything else has been streamlined.
Does that help agreement, like in terms of like planning things out? You know, like everyone's like that. Like, do people put because they feel like they can do more? Do people feel like there's less loss of going back on their time, and or they don't need to argue so hard up front because we can try both and see what happens?
I think so, because I think most things that get built end up getting shipped because it is enough effort for you to put it out, and then no one wants to be the person that says we should not ship this. And so I think there's still a good amount of utility in being discerning around what not to ship. And I think it was the open code founders that said this, something along the lines of, when coding becomes very easy, the hard skill is saying no to the things that you don't want to build as opposed to building the things that you decided you wanted to build.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting, though, because you see, a lot of user experience and scale in SaaS products is degraded by trying to serve everybody, right? And so, like, now that risk seems greater than ever because it's easy to add everything everyone wants, and you don't, if you're doing something in a pre-sales motion, whereas normally, someone would go, like, you see this pattern where people go sell a feature that killed the company because they couldn't implement it, and now you just do it before you even close the sale. So I don't know. Do you feel that risk, or do you feel like it's going to lead to complexity in software products in a way that is adversarial to users?
Yeah, I think if you take every customer request at face value and just build it how they ask, then you will end up with a nightmare, right? Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that's something that I spend a lot of my time doing, is sort of like intercepting customer requests as an engineer's trying to build it and say, like, hold on, let's get to like the root of this. Like, where's the commonality here? Like, does this fit with the vision of how we want merge queues to work? Because there's you could kitchen sink a merge queue because it's an automation pipeline. You can do whatever you want in there. And no, we're really focused on solving a couple of different problems here. And if there's another customer need, what's the real value that we can deliver for that? And I think just intercepting those, filtering down to what's really on the path to our North Star, making sure that's what we focus on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess all right. So I guess my next topic is kind of perhaps the one you've both thought about the most, given what you're working on. Like, where does tooling fit in? And I'm especially interested in what is important in the tool chain outside of the code generation itself. Like, it's just assuming that works these days.
Yeah.
So I think we started out building AI code review, and the idea was we wanted to automate code review. But we found that trivially easy because code review doesn't accomplish anything anyway. And most teams
it's a
code,
social construct
exactly.
as much as a code quality.
Yeah, I mean, we spent some time with a very large retailer in Arkansas, and their engineering team has group chats where people paste their PRs just asking people to approve them. So, there's not a lot of review that happens at a company that scale. And I imagine that's similarly true at startups and everything in between. And so I think replacing that was sort of not the hard part. What makes you think is like, okay, what are the actual things you need to do with coding? Because if you actually make a list of pre-AI, everything that we were doing to take code from when it was produced to when it was merged, it's obviously a lot of things. There's the coding itself. There's maybe some design doc planning. There's coding. There's the code review. There's maybe unit tests, integration tests. Maybe there's end-to-end tests. You might have a QA firm that QA is staging before releases are caught. And partly because we want to think from first principles, and partly because we don't have existing principles to think from because it's my first job. We kind of started to ask, okay, what are the actual things that need to happen to code from when it is done and being written to when it is getting merged? And we figured actually there's only kind of 3 questions that you have to answer. One is, does this code fulfill the intent of the author? Second, does it violate the user contract in some way? There's some set of expectations that the user has that this code change violates. And then third, does it increase the future propensity of a violation? This is things like maintainability and scalability and security and so on. And when you start to approach it as just answering these 3 questions, then you can kind of do away with the existing scaffolding of unit tests and integration tests. So many of those assume things like the scarcity of intelligence, which is no longer the case. Intelligence is basically free and infinite and on an API. And so I think we've at least tried to take a sort of kind of first principles approach and said, we're just going to build agents, and the agent's job is to tell you if this code can be merged or not. And that might involve running a security scanner, and might involve running some type of tests on it. It might involve spinning up a browser and clicking around. It might involve having agents just look at the code, maybe many agents look at the code. But we've kind of tried to approach it from scratch. I think some shape of code validation seems like it needs to exist, because we will not be able to scale our current processes for validation at the rate at which coding is growing. I think since last year, average commits per developer up about 3x. Total code on GitHub since pre-AI is up about 50x. So I think every existing system that isn't broken yet is about to be broken, and it's worth re-examining from scratch. We have this rare opportunity to rethink how we program, and I think it's a very exciting one.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely echo some of those same sentiments. I think about, we talk about this whole validation outside of just the code generation, and that's where at Trunk we talk about like inner loop versus outer loop, where that inner loop is just you're at your laptop with Claude, you're writing a whole bunch of code, you're able to test it locally, everything's fantastic, like works on my machine. And then the outer loop is all that process of like getting it to customers, right? It's getting it to CI, getting it to pass tests, getting code review, there's some iteration there, and you eventually get it out. And I think speeding up that outer loop is like the next frontier of shipping code fast, because that's where you go from AI, speed of code generation at AI, and then suddenly humans are in the loop. I'm waiting for people to review or click a button or deploy or whatever it is. So automating that stuff and making it fast that's the next step. That's where all that tooling matters. And I think that the people who are going to have the most success are going to use a really like a tiered system for automating the things that are cheap and fast, and then pushing as little as possible to humans. Nothing if we could, but. And we did this at Uber. So when I talked about that repo we were starting at the self-driving car program, we had a rule that there was no style guide written as text. It could only be written as linters and formatters. And that was so that we couldn't have a whole bunch of code review by humans just commenting nits, because that's just generating heat. It's a bunch of wasted time by people. And so what we ended up with was a whole array of linters and formatters that automatically checked every pull request for a lot of correctness. And it was just fast, it was always on, it was consistent, and we didn't waste a bunch of time with human reviews. I think if you extend that idea, now you need to have a lot more automated testing, and then a lot more automated AI code review, where AI can decide, does this need to be reviewed by a human? Is this a load-bearing piece of code, or is this something that we can just ship? And if you can shrink that space of how much code review needs to go to humans, then you can start to tighten that outer loop and ship code faster.
Do either of you think that having access, being the first people to access your product has changed how you've organized or managed the team?
I think our product wasn't useful to us early on because we were kind of not the target audience for it. Where we didn't have a review bottleneck early on because we didn't have a review process and we didn't have enough customers for.
You're both solving problems for large organizations.
Yeah, I think yours is probably even larger than ours.
Yeah. It's like we do dog food our stuff, but especially early on, it wasn't like solving our problem.
Yeah.
I remember we had an office hour where we were talking about what things were breaking at the company, and I said, what's really interesting is we have like 100 open pull requests. We need to hire faster, and then you pointed out the irony of the code review company having too many open pull requests.
All right. So speaking of tooling, where do agents fit in? Do you have things that are like software engineering employees, or what else? Where are you actually using agents in your workflows, Matt?
In our workflows or in the product?
Internally.
Internally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but as we've been adding more and more async agents that we can work with on Slack, eventually all of them end up just being one big God agent. I start to add more tools and more access and more credentials, where something that starts out looking at just investigating Datadog also needs access to LaunchDarkly and the code base and maybe some application data and then maybe some data from over here. And eventually giving it all the context that it needs to put together to solve problems ends up being the most effective thing. And so the agent that starts out with a prompt that says, hey, investigate which customers have onboarded to X feature, may end up also writing a pull request to fix some other feature that's tangential, right? And you never quite know where that exploration is going to finish when you start. And so having that agent be able to just kind of follow you through your train of thought has been really successful.
We have a actually surprisingly straightforward setup, which people just use Codex and Claude for the most part. We started using Devin again. It's good now. And we've given it as much context as we could. But people actually end up using just whatever works for them. And then whatever works for different things. People use Claude Code for like front-end type stuff. You were talking about
So there's no shared entities. Everyone's just kind of using some sort of harness locally. And you have rigging to make sure the context that everyone has access to.
Part of it is just, I think, building things piecewise, and so the local iteration speed being higher. Because I think, which one could argue that someone who's a much more experienced engineer could probably articulate more clearly upfront what they wanted and take advantage of a cloud agent. But I think we found the local environments are very fast. We do, however, have a workflow where after the pull request is opened, in the sense you have now fully expressed your intent to the machine. From there, a background decoding agent, whether it's Claude background, Cursor background, Devin, and Greptile iterate on the pull request, where Devin addresses Greptile's feedback, Greptile does another review, and the cycle continues until all of the comments are gone, and then it can be merged. So it kind of frees up cognitive space because now as an engineer, you can move on to the next thing. Your local environment is now free of responsibility in some sense.
Other than using Greptile, are you enforcing consistency at all across the org, or is people just whatever they find useful, they can code with?
No, yeah, just Greptile is the only guardrail where we have our rules of what we want to do and don't want to do, just all programmed in there. Yeah. Don't add another way of doing integrations or something, and the agents tend to violate those rules, get caught, and iterate.
Do you care what your team's using, Matt, or is it?
No, I think I agree with you. In terms of what harnesses people are using on their laptop for day-to-day coding, it's whatever people work with best, I think is important. The one thing that is important is in our repos, we do have all of the documents that we used to put in something like Notion or Slite end up in the repository. So we are keeping ADRs, TRDs, PRDs, all that stuff goes in the repo. And then there's some mandated structure for CloudMD files. So whatever harness you're using does need to be able to read those CloudMD files automatically and then navigate the tree and know to write or update or modify those documents in the repository. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's just as long as you continue to have the source of truth, the actual thing generating tokens is somewhat fungible. Do you both? God, what was I just had another question and I started talking and forgot it. Do you both have a significant portion of the team dedicated toward building tooling out for the rest of the team?
No, not so much. It's not dedicated, but it's very democratized. And I think that's one of the things that we interview for is like somebody who looks at the world around them and wants to make it a better place. And that's like both internally and externally. And so a lot of our tech leads will often just take on the mantle and say like, hey, like half of our sprint is going to be like improving this process, building this tool, whatever it is. And that's something that I found for me is actually one of the most high leverage thing is like, how can I pave a way for people to build good internal tools? So like something that's very trivial is like I just stood up another Next.js app that gets deployed into production, has access to, application data, but it's like just our admin portal. And I built it, I put one tool in there, and then over the past couple of months, now there's like 30 or 40 different workflows that people have added in there because it's the fastest way to like get a thing done. And so I just look for opportunities like that where like, hey, where can we add tooling or like pave a road for people to add tooling if they have an idea?
How do you think about developing engineers now that there's this tool set? Is it now like on them to be self-learners? Like is it are there skills that people are now missing out on reps because they're having models generate all the tools? Like what do you think about taking junior people and bringing them up to speed?
So I think for us, we've kind of created RL environments for each pod to work through, where you kind of own the outcome of the product, and then as an example, let's say you're one of the two people that works on the sandbox. You're responsible for shipping the new version of the sandbox that's more efficient, also having the Grafana dashboard to track if it's good, and you're also responsible for support if the sandbox goes down. And so there's a bit of a loop here where, it's kind of a messy way to do it, but there's a bit of a loop here where there's a very strong incentive to do things correctly. I do think that after the first time that maybe you put out something and it doesn't get the utilization that you wanted, or maybe it doesn't have the performance that you wanted, there's some self-corrective loop. I think just as a company, because we, again, ourselves are not highly experienced engineers, we found that just recruiting people that we thought were really great. On the subject of sort of new grads in particular, if you're willing to convince people to not go to quant, that is an extraordinary group of new grads that I think are actually like very highly effective and like don't really need to be closely coached or anything of that kind. But then of course you have to convince someone to not join $1 million a year Jane Street offer in New York.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back a little bit to what I said earlier about just people with the attitude and the mentality of just like kind of self-teaching and exploring the things around them. But I do think that with the opportunity of a lot more AI code generation in the day-to-day, it's become increasingly isolating. And I think especially so at a company that's more distributed. So we do have people all over the country, and I've found that like we're just communicating less because people can get more done by themselves. They don't need to like collaborate across a team. And so even right now, like we're in the midst of like how do we kind of break out of those silos again? And so I'm starting to look at, do we start doing more pair programming, kind of bringing back some stuff that we haven't done in a long time, but just how do we kind of get that like forcing function of just like working together, fostering collaboration. We like the people we work with, so I want to like see them more and work with them more.
Like, is the impetus more just team morale and feeling like a team, or do you actually think that there's like a code quality benefit of talking to someone other than one of the models all day?
Oh, I think it's definitely both, and I think that's kind of it, like talking to somebody who's not the models all day. Like I will regularly pull in my staff engineers just to like sanity check me, like how far along this like path am I with just Claude? Is this real? Are we going somewhere? Like bring in some other perspective. You guys have like seen other talks that I haven't seen, you've talked to people that I haven't talked to, and so like let's just get more variation on the perspectives. So
that kind of anticipates my next question. It sounds like you believe there are still people with knowledge that is more valuable than is available from the current frontier models.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Like I think the models, like they generate amazing code and they know how to build software, but there still is something to just like having people with different perspectives come together, put their opinions together and reason through that. And I think if you spend too long with just the models, you're not getting a different perspective, right? You're getting Claude's perspective all day long. And then everything ends up looking like Claude built it, which, okay, it might be good, but I think if you're trying to build something exceptional, you need to pull in people with different backgrounds, different opinions, some deep subject matter experts, some creative people, and then you can build something great.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, it feels like the product management is kind of like inherently, I don't know, inherent's like a scary word in the age of AI, but like is somewhat like is almost like subjective in the sense that it's like for humans, so like by humans makes sense. But do you think that like architecture is going the way of eventually being, you know, asking Claude's going to be as good as anything?
That's a good question. I think right now it really is a matter of like how much context can you give Claude on the initial prompt, right? Like how deeply can we walk through this initial architecture? And I think it does take a lot of iteration. And I think to your comment earlier of like, give me a week to build something, I'll take 3 days to write the document. I think that's where human-driven software still has a lot of value. It might be a lot of iterating with Claude, but like I still think the architecture really matters, especially when you're building something load-bearing. And so will that go away? Maybe more and more over time, but definitely right now I think it matters.
I guess and then like how do you think about I guess I'm reminded of it just because Doctor, like what is going on with the retention market and engineers, and like is there has the shape of discrepancy between the best engineers and mediocre engineers changed, and is it feeling more competitive, or are you staffing kind of in a similar manner to the way you used to be?
So I think to the extent that pre-AI there were 1xers and 10xers, the AI is an amplification on each of these people, where the 10xer is like a 10,000xer now with all of this leverage. And the result of this is that you would probably pay kind of any amount to get the right person. We're now a team of close to 40 people. I spend probably 60% of my total time on recruiting, of which half of that time is convincing a 22-year-old to leave Citadel every single day, forever. And I think AI, to a great degree, has made everyone a mercenary, including great talent. Great talent, especially in the Bay Area, knows that they're great talent. And there's just the opportunity cost of picking the wrong company is so high that people will always be trying to figure out if they can join the better thing. And there's a bit of a two-edged sword in San Francisco, where if you're recruiting in San Francisco and you're in person, then there's some loyalty-driven and personal relationship-driven retention. But at the same time, if you're in San Francisco, you're surrounded with greener grass, or at least perceptibly greener grass. And I think that retention for that reason is extremely difficult problem, probably nearly as difficult as hiring itself, getting people to join. Everyone that we make offers to, it's like this usual suspects of shadowy RL Lab, Frontier, OpenAI or Anthropic. There's a random big tech in there, and then 4 Series A, Series B startups. It's like the same 7 offers that they're competing against. And it's weird where the type of conversation you have with a sophisticated engineering person is essentially telling them that there's huge upside in the equity, and in some ways it's like fundraising purgatory, where you're constantly telling someone that equity is very valuable forever, all the time.
Anything to add?
No, I would echo a lot of that actually.
Instead of someone that went to Stanford GSB 10 years ago, you're talking to someone that went to Stanford undergrad 1 year ago.
Yeah.
Are there any other skills that you're, like other than like people that are used to using AI, used to learning, kind of I don't know, like user empathetic as is maybe a little easier because you're doing in project for engineers. Anything you find yourself prioritizing in new hires that's surprising? Is everyone going to be like a designer or PM on some timeline?
I don't think so. I do think it has changed the way that I hire, though. I think when we first started the company, I was looking for a lot of generalists because we just needed people who could like kind of move all over the stack. And while that's not true anymore, I do think that there's like a couple of archetypes that, especially at our size and where AI is right now, that really help to accelerate us more than a generalist, right? And so I think you have like the deep subject matter experts who can close the gap on something that Claude still can't quite do. There's just some places where it can get lost in a dark corner and not quite know how to proceed. And then you just have maybe it's this mercenary type or this creative builder type, but somebody who can like have the picture of the thing they want in their head and relentlessly go for that and accomplish it from idea to like get it in front of customers. And I think those are the two things that I generally look for. It doesn't have to be both, but I want to see people who fit into one of those things because I think those people are the ones who fill in the gaps that Claude or your agent doesn't, right? Like the agent is the generalist now, and so those other two archetypes are the things that I find that it's not great at, and so those are the things that help accelerate the development for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like it's like specifically complementary to the model.
Yeah, exactly. Like if the model is paving down the middle, let's find the people who can like drive the ends of it.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen to org size and startups and bigs? I guess perhaps let me start with Matt because you sell to large organizations with a lot of engineers. You've been at a very big software engineering org. What do you, like? Is anything going to change?
Yeah, I think so. I think at these big organizations, what I'm seeing a lot, like from our customers and from just places where I've worked and friends work. You always needed a lot of tooling to run a large repository, right? Anytime anyone, when I was Uber, we didn't have monorepos yet, but anytime that subject got broached, there was just a lot of skepticism that they were going to invest the time and the money and the tooling that it takes to really run a good monorepo. And I think that gets amplified because the same 500, 1,000 people are now generating 10, 20 times the pull requests and the traffic. And there's just more tooling that needs to be put in place. And so these companies are investing a lot in building out that tooling. And you can look at like what Uber is doing now for how they're running their agentic engineering. They've built a lot of stuff internally. And this is across the board at these larger companies. I think that us on the small end, we're able to get a lot more done with less people, but there's starting to be kind of a hurdle of like, how do I organize a team of 6 people to work on one thing at a time, right? Like teams of 3 people, I can organize that, but like, what would I do with 6 people? Like, there's not 6 things to do,
and
right?
Where do a bunch of teams of 3 roll up to, and how do you structure?
Yeah, exactly. That? Like every IC is now driving 6 to 10 Claude code sessions. So then every team of 3 is really a team of 30 or whatever. And so and the organization doesn't just like scale vertically like that, right? Like it doesn't. The context sharing, the conversation, the planning, it doesn't scale the same way that it used to when you just added more ICs. So I don't know. I think there is some hurdle to get over there, and I don't know exactly what it is.
Do you think that means the orgs just to scale is to do more things as opposed to one bigger thing? Does that make sense? I don't even know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're able to do so much more with only, a quarter of the people that I would have thought you would need to do what we're doing now. Yeah. But yeah, you would just do more.
Anything?
Sometimes I spend a lot of time with a variety of our customers. Some of them are large legacy software companies. Lots of them are tiny startups. And the discrepancy in revenue per employee to me is like insane, where you'll have these companies where business sizes aren't that large and there are hundreds or maybe thousands of people. And then we'll work with some AI native startup, which is like a $150 million business, and there's like 12 engineers on the whole team. And I think the question that you ask is, okay, that very large company, like, it's kind of sort of cynically, like, why aren't there fewer people? Why haven't they sort of restructured the company? And someone tried to explain this to me in the shape of, just because it's possible to make a light car doesn't make you can make a heavy car light by ripping out random parts. You kind of have to build the whole thing differently from the start. So I think there's this new wave of SaaS companies that exist, which are just lighter in size, and you probably just can't make a heavier company light. The cost of producing their code base is a lot smaller. We kind of think about ServiceNow, every meticulously written line of code in that code base has rapidly depreciated in economic value. The other thing that I find very interesting is, while engineering is very compressible in the sense that the size of the engineering team for the same business size is a lot smaller. Sales is actually not very compressible because the bottleneck on sales after you've automated all the ops parts is just concurrent relationship management. And so I think you'll find companies, especially like ours, which are very enterprise, will probably be mostly salespeople. And we have a company that as we sort of start to scale and get into the hundreds of thousands of customers, we might be 300 salespeople and 30 engineers, as opposed to if you look at the public software companies that are more half and half between engineering and go-to-market.
I guess related, to the concept of like cost in these teams, like internally with your engineers, like how are you thinking about token use, and is it, are we token maxing, or is it like? Do you care? Are you encouraging them in one direction or the other?
No, I mean, we're just looking at like features shipped, not tokens consumed. But generally, most of our engineers are using like a Claude Code subscription, and they're not going over their usage limits. When Fable was out for a day or whatever, I just thought of the biggest tasks that I had in the backlog, and I gave it to like 3 sessions, quickly spent $500 and realized that it's not going to scale quite that well. But yeah, I think largely like the status quo has been most of the time the engineers are not spending any overage over like a $200 Claude subscription.
You the same?
Yeah, our R&D token spend is like within an order of magnitude of total payroll. Probably actually I would say within 3 or 4x of total payroll. Or I guess total payroll is 3 or 4x from inference and this is excluding like the cost of serving customers, of course. And I think there's a lot of chatter in the larger companies around token spend, and I think they are right to be worried because I think 10 or 20 person startups like yours are probably getting far more economic value per token than a large company is. And so I think you can actually justify using 4 concurrent Fable sessions to change a Tailwind string, but I think that unlimited Fable is probably not a good policy for 5,000 person company where they'll say, okay, we spent $150 million this year on tokens, and we moved like 20% faster because we have all this other scaffolding that's slowing us down.
Yeah. I think looking at like our highest output engineers, if I do occasionally check how much their token cost would be if we were not on Claude Code subscriptions, and it's typically anywhere between 5 and 10x what we're paying. So they're paying like $1,000 to $2,000 worth of tokens a month, which that starts to become like a real cost if I was actually paying that, right? And so these large organizations that aren't allowed to be on these Claude Code subscriptions, then that's a huge cost.
Yeah, it's a bit of it's kind of like the drug dealer model. get you hooked young. Okay, I guess just a couple of closing things. Like, is there anything either of you Is anything like struck you is like you've changed your mind on, and like how to organize your team or engineering management over the last? Is either you changed your mind or really surprised you over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a little bit, but I think just like reducing team size and reducing process and giving more autonomy to the engineers to just build and get out of their way. And I think that was amplified by taking the wrong processes from Uber and trying to put them in a startup, but then amplified again as this AI wave took over. And so just making sure that like the team understands what the North Star is, like what our context is, make sure that they're getting face time with customers, and then trusting that they're able to digest that and come up with great things has really unlocked our ability to ship and move fast.
So I think very, very similar vein where earlier this year decided that we were going to hire an engineering leader, and fortunately, we work with a lot of the best engineering leaders, so I just called all of them one by one and said, hey, we want to hire an engineering leader. What should we look for? You obviously run your team very well. You've had this great career as an engineering leader. What should we do? And invariably, every single one said, do not hire someone like me. Nothing that I have learned in my 30-year career is still true. You just figure this out from first principles. In fact, like companies like yours, like I think there's a lot to, obviously things are probably a lot more structured at their companies, but there's a lot to learn from how the best, maybe not us in particular, but a lot of the best 20 or 30 person engineering teams are doing things. And we decided actually just not to hire an engineering leader at the end of it. And just and almost like all these conversations removed the general nervousness that I had around discovering things from first principles and how an engineering team should be run. Because all of these people that had run these engineering teams were saying, you should just figure this out and do what feels right. And don't listen to people that look like us. And I don't know if this is a prank, but so far that's what we've been doing, and it seems to be working okay.
It's a conspiracy. They all decided to tell you that at once. All right. Well, you might just say the same thing again with my next question then. So like given things are moving so fast, I suspect this is not where it ends, and people that are running and managing engineering teams are gonna have to continue to stay on top of it. So like, what is your advice to them on how to do so?
I think it's. I honestly, I get asked this question all the time from customers we work with, and we do now these roundtables with sort of CTOs and VPs, particularly in the peninsula for these large companies. And the question is around like, what should we be doing to use this stuff better? And I think to a great degree, I've just said, I think try to unscaffold as much as possible, and don't commit to anything. Which kind of sucks because we sell annual contracts, but I think generally good advice to not commit to anything, except us, obviously. You want your guardrails to be consistent. But the other thing I say is I think almost every company that we work with, we have this sort of, there's always maybe it's a head of engineering, maybe it is the VP, maybe it's like a staff engineer who's like the most AI crazed person. And we know this one person at every company because that is always the person that reaches out to us first from the company. And I think this person is usually an early member of the team, very senior, very smart, and has decided that the highest leverage thing they could be doing is radicalizing their company around AI. And so all they do is find the best possible tool stack and best possible everything else. And I think the best engineering leaders have given this person a lot of control and autonomy and influence to be able to do whatever they want to. I think the companies that are the most on the frontier have a powerful, influential person, usually an IC, sometimes a leader, who just can do whatever they want and evangelize whatever tool stack they think is currently the best possible thing to do and try all kinds of things.
I think what I would say is like it's important to stay involved in the details, and I think even as your organization grows, understanding what the day-to-day is like for developing software, and I think the reason that I would say that is that some of these small inefficiencies, these little paper cuts, really build up and really waste engineers' time, and you end up with a very inefficient software engineering organization, not able to ship code. With AI, that just multiplies because instead of one engineer not getting things done, it's a 10x engineer not getting things done. And so occasionally getting into the weeds, into the details, and finding those inefficiencies and getting them prioritized. And I think developer experience is not the sexy thing when you're shipping, Greptile, but like making sure that that your engineers are efficient and knowing day to day like what's slowing them down and getting that unblocked is really important.
Awesome. I mean, yeah, that is really, I guess, awesome advice. Okay, Matt, Daksh, this has been honestly like fascinating. I think I could probably ask you questions every couple of weeks so I can keep up myself with what the hell is happening in the world. So thanks a lot for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun.